Now about Swami Vivekananda, much needs to be told about Swamiji's life. We all know that he was born exactly 6 years after the 1857 War of Independence that India has collectively waged. The Hindus, the Muslims, they were fighting side by side with the British enemy, chanting the slogans of Har Har Mahadev and Deen Deen Allahu Akbar together, as has been documented in the India Office files, which were compiled and which were brought into a book form by V.D. Savarkar. He was born 6 years after India waged its first battle for independence, and at the age of 23 years, he took to sannyasa. That was 1886. 1886, mind you, is the time when the great sage Dayananda Saraswati passed away. Dayananda Saraswati waged a relentless battle for going back to the Vedas and taking Indian culture back to its roots. So, where Dayananda left through his sannyasa, Vivekananda has picked up. This is a very interesting point to note. And he founded the R.K. Math, Ramakrishna Matha or Ramakrishna Mission, that we now know as one of the most significant institutions that influence our public life and our social thinking, and also our approach to service, nation, so on and so forth. The Ramakrishna Math was founded in 1897. Swami Vivekananda lived on for 5 more years after he founded Ramakrishna Mission. He has built a code of conduct for the organization, and he had given a mission and a vision for the Ramakrishna Matha, and then he passed away in 1902. So the most important aspect that needs to be remembered is the first major battle for India's first major phase of India's battle for independence begins with the division of Bengal that has been perpetrated by Lord Curzon in 1905. That was the time when the Bengalis as a whole, those in East Bengal, which is now Bangladesh, and the Bengalis in the today's West Bengal, they rose as one man, and that was the phase when we saw Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore walking up the stairs of Nakhoda Masjid in Calcutta and tying a rakhi to the Maulavi of the Nakhoda Masjid and say that we will all oppose the illegal, immoral division of Bengal. So 1905 to 1911 was the time when the Bengal division and the agitation that followed have electrified the whole country. I have worked in a city called Rajamundry in East Godavari district of Andhra Pradesh. There is a chowk in that village which goes by the name Pal Chowk. I inquired as to why this is called as a Pal Chowk. The old timers told me that Bipin Chandra Pal, one of the members of the Troika, Lal Bal Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Bal is Bal Gangadhar Tilak. These 3 people were considered the vanguards of India's modern independence movement, and Bipin Chandra Pal was invited by the people of East Godavari. They brought him in a train all the way from Kolkata, and after he came to Rajamundry, he was taken in a chariot procession, and then he addressed the people in Bengali and English. The language did not matter. That Bipin Chandra Pal was speaking Bengali and English did not matter for the people of Andhra Pradesh. They named the place where he stood as Pal Chowk, and the place where he addressed as the Pal stage or dais, you can say roughly in Telugu. And even to this day, there are old timers who have written in glowing terms about the electrifying effect that Bipin Chandra Pal has had on the Telugu people. It was during that period that one of the biggest, mantras of a Swadeshi fight by a Telugu poet called Chilakamarti Lakshmi Narasimham was written, and even to this day that song is sung. The point I am trying to make is the first national awakening on the political stream was by the by Bipin Chandra Pal of the Lal Bal Pal Troika. Vivekananda passed away in 1902, a good 3 years before the Bengal's division and the attendant agitation, massive agitation, no doubt. But Vivekananda passed away before the first agitation that took place for the independence of the country. So, how can we say that Vivekananda had a role in the independence movement? The natural question is, someone who passes away in 1902 cannot influence or cannot play a role in an agitation that takes place in 1905. So naturally the question is, what role could possibly Vivekananda have played? Because he was removed from the scene by 1902. But then I would like to quote from what Mata Sharada, the consort of Lord Sri Ramakrishna and mother, mother personified for Swami Vivekananda, Sharada Mata said of Vivekananda on coming to know about his demise. You'd be surprised to know that Sharada Mata lived on for a longer period of time after the passing of both Ramakrishna as well as Vivekananda. There are records that Sharada Mata has gone all the way to Kanyakumari to have the darshana of, the child form of mother, the Kanyakumari, in Kanyakumari, and during her travel she stopped over at River Godavari in Rajahmundry. So Sharada Mata is said to have remarked in, I would like to read out from the remark of Sharada Mata. Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi, on knowing about Swamiji's demise, she had made this a very interesting remark. She said, if Naren had been alive, the British government would have kept him in captivity. This is a very interesting and very significant statement coming from a mystic like Sharada Mata. She was saying that had he been alive, he would have been put behind the bars. So that was the kind of attitude that Swami Vivekananda had. Swami Vivekananda, during his lifetime, even before the embers of the freedom struggle were, inflamed, he was trying to mold people, mold youth, and drive them towards independence. There are two occasions during which Swami Vivekananda spoke about India becoming independent. There is one occasion when a freedom fighter called Hemachandra Ghosh, he goes on to meet Swami Vivekananda when he tours Dhaka. Swami Vivekananda visited Dhaka somewhere around 1890s, late 1890s. Then there was a revolutionary organization in that area known as Dhaka Mukti Sangha, which was led by Hemachandra Ghosh, and Hemachandra Ghosh was intimately connected to Aravind Ghosh, Bhupendra Gupta, Barindra Ghosh, and so on and so forth. All the freedom fighters who were actually inciting the people and driving them towards the path of independent struggle. He met Swami Vivekananda in 1901, 1 year before he passed away. Swamiji passed away. Swamiji kept very ill in the last phases of his life, and Hemachandra Ghosh and his friends go and meet Swamiji when he comes to Dhaka. He writes in his reminiscences. Hemachandra Ghosh's reminiscences are available in Bengali, which I had the great fortune of accessing. And he says, what Swamiji tells Hemachandra Ghosh, please listen carefully. I am quoting from Hemachandra Ghosh of what Swami Vivekananda said. He says, India should be politically free first. Look at the statement. Politically, India should become free first. This was what Swami Vivekananda told Hemachandra Ghosh way back in 1901, 5 years before or 4 years before the Bengal division took place. Swamiji says India must become politically free first, because nobody in the World Committee of Nations will ever respect or listen to a colonized country. And take it from me, India shall be free. This is the first time Swami Vivekananda spoke about India becoming independent. the inevitable fate of India attaining independence. He was speaking about it in 1901. In 1901, before the first war in the form of Bengal division, the battle against Vangabhanga took place, Swamiji was saying that India will become free. And Swamiji further said, no power on earth can resist this fact, and I tell you, that moment is not very far. This is what Swami Vivekananda tells in 1901. Look at the drashta in Swami Vivekananda, who could visualize the independence of this country almost 40 years before it was made independent. And Swamiji Vivekananda says getting political independence is the first task before the Indian youth. That's what he says. And the second statement, Hemachandra also writes that, Swami is saying that, as somebody very close to the heart of revolutionaries who sacrificed their lives at such a young age. So Swamiji's role as as a motivator of the revolutionary youth, he was the one who started, who motivated the youths to start, the Vyayam Shalas all across the country, as if on a cue. If you study the independence movement, the social aspects of independence movement, unfortunately, we only study the political aspects of independence movement. In the social aspect, you would find that whenever there is oppression, the first thing that happened was bhajan mandals were started all across the country. The bhajan mandal is started, and then the youth gathered at the temple. And in every temple, there used to be a bar where they can do all those exercises that strengthen the chest, biceps, abdomen, so on and so forth. So Vyayam Shalas were an integral part of our independence movement, something which we tend to forget today. And in fact, Madan Mohan Malaviya said, Pathashala, Mallashala, Bhojashala. The temple must be a school, temple must be a school of learning, temple must be a Vyayam Shala, place where youth hone their physical skills, and then a place where the poorest of the poor get their food, morsel of food. This was what Madan Mohan Malaviya and Vivekananda too asked the Indian youth, particularly those in Bengal, to start Vyayam Shalas. Start Vyayam Shalas and start practicing. And these Vyayam Shalas would slowly become a revolutionary organizations. The famous Maniktala bomb case, originated in the 1910 or so. Maniktala bomb case and Jugantar bomb case. All these bomb cases trace their roots to the Vyayam Shalas founded by the Indian youth. They were motivated by Swami Vivekananda to start those Vyayam Shalas. In fact, even Aurobindo Ghosh also wanted the youth to start the Vyayam Shala. So Vyayam Shala is an essential part and parcel of India's freedom movement. This is an aspect that has not been given much attention. And then Swamiji tells, he motivates people. And who is Hemchandra Das? Hemchandra Das was a freedom fighter whose birth anniversary celebrated by both Bangladesh as well as India together. His 107th birth anniversary has been celebrated some months ago. He was the one who motivated Binay Badal and Dinesh, who tried to take over the Writers' Building, the seat of authority of the British Empire in Kolkata. So, he was connected with the independence movement. Let us see what Aurobindo has said. Aurobindo, fortunately, was one person who was intimately connected with Swami Vivekananda. Aurobindo and Vivekananda both, lived at the same time. Aurobindo was born in 1872, and Vivekananda, as I said, was born in 1863. The age difference between Aurobindo and Vivekananda was 9 years. So they had their time together, they worked together, and Swami Vivekananda motivated Aurobindo to take to arms and lead an agitation. Aurobindo Ghosh and Rasbihari Bosu, these two revolutionaries are very unique in India's history. They have never directly participated in any revolutionary movement. They have never made any statement against the British government. They have only used their power of the pen and the power of their speech, their oratorical skills, and they motivated youth to wage a war against the Britishers. There was no evidence available about their direct connection with the revolutionary movement, though the British always suspected them and always, tailed them and tried to study their movement. Aravinda Ghosh was influenced by Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda, Aravinda Ghosh was on record saying, there is a book called, the name of the book is On Himself. Aravinda wrote this book on himself. In this book, he tries to explain the influence Vivekananda had on him, one, and how he prodded him to become a part of the independence movement and lead the independence movement in Bengal. That's very interesting, Sri Aurobindo went on record in the book on himself. This can be available on Sri Aurobindo Birth Centenary Library, both Puducherry or anywhere else in the Aurobindo centers. He says, "It is a fact that I was hearing constantly the voice of Vivekananda speaking to me for a fortnight in the jail in my solitary meditation and I felt his presence." For 15 days, he was confined to solitary confinement and nobody was allowed to meet. Aurobindo was arrested in case of this Yugantar and Maniktola case, and then he was inside the prison, solitary confinement. There was no one to actually provide any kind of succor. And it is in these times that he started meditating on Bhagavad Gita. And it was during this time that Swami Vivekananda, according to Aurobindo himself is on record saying that for 15 days Swami Vivekananda appeared to him, his voice was heard, and he told about the essence of Bhagavad Gita and what to be done. What is to be done after you go out of the prison. And there he says, the voice spoke only on special and limited but very important field of spiritual experience, and it ceased as soon as it had finished saying that all it had to say on the subject. This is the kind of influence that Swami Vivekananda had on the father of India's unrest in the West Bengal, Aravinda Ghosh. It was under the influence of Aravinda Ghosh that Khudiram Bose in 1911 sacrificed his life and became martyred for the cause of India. It was on his call that people like Barindra Ghosh, his brother, Arabindo's brother, Barindra Ghosh, Bhupendra Datta, Pramadhanath Datta, and then Bhupendra Datta, incidentally, is the brother of Swami Vivekananda. And there is an interesting tale about Bhupendranath Datta and Narendranath Datta, Swami Vivekananda. After Swamiji became a sannyasi, he used to be regularly in touch with Bhupendranath Datta and give him directions as to how to wage a war of independence. This is mentioned by Bhupendranath Datta in a book that he has written, and the name of the book is Swami Vivekananda, Patriarch Prophet. So Bhupendranath Datta, is a very multifaceted person. He waged a war against the Britishers, and after that, he became part of the Juganta movement, and then he ran the Jugantar Patrika, one of the newspapers that the revolutionaries had published, and then he goes abroad and he joins the Gadar movement. Gadar movement, mind you, has roots even in Punjab. Kartar Singh Saraba, Lala Hardayal, all these people from Punjab, they go to Canada and US, and in the US, this man, Bhupendranath Datta, meets them and they form what is known as Gadar Party. Gadar is a revolution. Gadar Party was formed, and Gadar Party, develops contacts all across the globe. It tries to unite the Indians living abroad, for instance, as far as Singapore. You'd be surprised. Subhash Chandra Bosu's Azad Hind Fauj had its roots. It could get this support in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia and Japan so quickly because of the roots that were laid by Bhupendranath Datta, brother of Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, or Narendranath Datta in his Purvashtam. So, this man forms the Gadar Party and then conspires with the Germans during the First World War. During the 1914 to 1918 period, they conspire with the Germans, and then bring the German spies come to Kolkata to actually identify, do the reconnaissance work so that they can identify the areas that could be attacked. This is famously known as the Indo-German conspiracy case. This is part of our independence movement that has been suppressed for some reason. So this Indo-German, during the, it would be surprising to understand the impact of this Indo-German conspiracy case. Indo-German unity, some of the leaders from Uttar Pradesh, Raja Mahendra Pratap and Barkatullah Khan from Rajasthan, they go all the way to Afghanistan and form a government there, a government of India in exile. Barkatullah was the president, and Raja Mahendra Pratap was the president. Barkatullah was the prime minister, and the foreign minister was a Tamilian from Trivandrum. His name is Champakaraman Pillai. He was the one who used to chant Jai Hind, and it was this Jai Hind that Champakaraman Pillai's friend Abid Ali Hassan Jafrani, Abid Ali Hassan Zafrani, and this man picks up the same chant of Jai Hind and he transfers it to Subhash Chandra Bose, and who turns it into a war cry. So this Gadar movement, the independent government that was formed in Afghanistan, had its roots in the Indo-German conspiracy case, and the Indo-German conspiracy case, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore is also part of this conspiracy, and he goes to countries like Brazil, Argentina, and even China, and even Japan to actually mobilize support for this. This was such a subterranean, secretive movement that in Jharkhand in those days, in the 1914 to 1918 in Jharkhand, the tribals used to greet, the tribals, Ao, Santhal, Oraon, Munda, Ho, these tribals used to greet one another as Kaisar Baba ki Jai. Who is Kaisar Baba? Kaisar Baba was the chancellor of the Germany. So the tribals in Ranchi, Jharkhand, Chotanagpur area were aware of this conspiracy. They were waiting for the opportunity. If the weapons that Germany sends lands on India's coast of Balasore in Orissa, they would be shifted and transferred to various parts of the country. And in one go, the tribals were the freedom fighters were to revolt, and all the Indians living abroad will revolt against the Britishers in Singapore, in all other places, Singapore, Malaysia, Horn of Africa, and then Palestine, so on and so forth. So the British would be crippled from all sides. This was called by the Britishers as Indo-German conspiracy case. Bhupendranath Datta was part of this European Indo-German conspiracy case. It is another matter that this conspiracy fails because of a traitor inside. He informs the Britishers that a steamer full of weapons is on its way to Balasore coast in Odisha, and the famous freedom fighter, a yogi kind of man, a practitioner of yoga, a very great Advaitist and a disciple of Aurobindo, Rishi Aurobindo, Jatindranath Chattopadhyay. He is also known as Bagha Jatin in independence history because he single-handedly, with bare hands, he actually kills a tiger. That is the reason why he is called Bagha Jatin. Bagh is actually a tiger. So he is known as Bagha Jatin. He comes to receive the consignment of weapons. So Britishers who had the prior knowledge of it, they arrest him. So this man, Jatindranath, also was influenced by both Vivekananda as well as Aurobindo Ghosh. He gets caught and he dies in a gunfight that ensues with the British. The Indo-German conspiracy case, actually gets. So the Gadar party. The Bhupendranath Datta was none else than the brother of Swami Vivekananda. Missionaries who were influenced by Swami Vivekananda's personality, his magnetic, thoughts, and then his electrifying, deeds. Mahatma Gandhi wanted to meet Swami Vivekananda when there was this All India Congress Committee meeting in Kolkata in 1901. 1 year before Swami Vivekananda's passing away. This man goes and goes to Calcutta. He speaks there, And after that, he expresses his desire to meet Swami Vivekananda. Mahatma Gandhi, true to Mahatma Gandhi's style, is a very adamant kind of a man, and he trekked all this way. He went on foot to the Belur Mutt. He walks for over 2 hours and then reaches Belur Mutt, only to know that Swami Vivekananda was in Kolkata. So he comes back disappointed, and he says that he could not meet Swami Vivekananda. Then he tries, a second time to meet Swami Vivekananda the next day. Then he was told that Swami Vivekananda was very ill and was unable to receive any visitors. So Swami Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi writes about his impressions of Swami Vivekananda, and he says, if there is one master at whose feet I want to sit, that is Swami Vivekananda. You'd be surprised, 30 years later, 35 years later, Subhash Chandra Bose says, if Swami Vivekananda is my leader, I would sit at his feet and worship him, and I would simply follow whatever he says. Look at the influence this man had 30 years after his demise, passing away, 40 years after his passing away, how revolutionary after revolutionary was singing his praises. So I would like to, tell about one interesting aspect of Swami Vivekananda's life that is not been discussed much, and then I would, wind up. Swami Vivekananda in 1895, that is 7 years before his passing away, he meets a British woman called, Margaret Elizabeth Noble. Margaret Elizabeth Noble is without doubt the inheritor of Swami Vivekananda's ideology on Rashtra, Rashtriyata, and patriotism and struggle for independence. She was, tutored by Swami Vivekananda for years. There are images of Swami Vivekananda and Margaret Noble, visiting, Srinagar, visiting Shankaracharya Parbat in Srinagar, where he teaches her Advaita Vedanta and also his mission for India. It is there that he actually teaches her the concept of Indian Rashtriyata. See, the Indian Rashtriyata, the Indian nationhood is entirely different from the Western concept of nation. The Western nations are either states or nations or nation states. A king has the power to subdue a piece of chunk of land, and that becomes a state. Or a chunk of land has a continuous history of coexistence of a group of people who speak the same language and practice the same religion. They become a nation. And then there are nation states. The Westphalian Agreement has brought in the concept of nation states. In case of India, it is different. It is civilizational state. We are a civilizational state. In my part, women, when they go to Godavari river to bathe, they would say, "Main Ganga ja raha hu." So, so-called educated people like me ask them, Ganga, you're not going to Ganga, you're going to Godavari. This is Godavari, not Ganga. Correct yourselves. And these old women, 80s and 90s, never been to schools, never studied in any formal education. These women say, "Nahi, ye Ganga hai." For them, Godavari is Ganga. How can Ganga in the North India can cast its influence on the people living in South? There is a region in Tamil Nadu called Kongu Nadu, which is close to Kerala. Actually, it abuts Wayanadu. Kongu Nadu is, is nothing but Gangai Nadu, which means the king of that area has brought water from Ganga there and stored there. So it is known as Gangai Nadu, which is now pronounced as Kongu Nadu. One of the greatest Tamil kings is known as Gangai Konda Cholan. He is Raja Narendra, is called Gangai Konda Cholan. Why is he called Gangai Konda Cholan? Because he brought the river Ganga, lots of water from river Ganga, and brought it down south. It was considered such a great thing that he is known as Gangai Konda Cholan, the Chola who brought Ganga water. This is the story. Punjab and Haryana have over 100 temples to Eknath Ji, who is a Maharashtrian saint, I am told. many of his abhangs and many of his shlokas are incorporated. I am told. I have never studied in the Guru Granth Sahib also. This man, he makes it his mission to walk up to Varanasi, collect Ganga water, come back to Rameshwaram down south, which is not a part of his Maharashtrian milieu, and then performs ablutions and pujas to the Rameshwaram. And he collects water from the Indian Ocean and takes it all along and walks all up to Kashi and then performs ablutions there. So in India, we have this concept of cultural nationalism. Swamy Vivekananda imparted education in cultural education to Margaret Noble, who later became Nivedita, someone who was dedicated to India. So she became a Nivedita Pushpa for the cause of nationalism. And it was, Swami Sodari Nivedita, Bhagini Nivedita, who actually transformed, who actually, transmitted Swami Vivekananda's ideas and nationalism. You would be surprised to know, during her short life in, Bengal, she started schools where Vande Mataram was made the national anthem. One. Secondly, she also, brought together painters like Abanindranath Tagore, Ananda Kumara Swami of Tamil Nadu, and also, started what is known as the School of Bengali Art, Bengal School of Art. It was the Bengal School of Art that has revolutionized art and that has promoted patriotism and nationalism in India. You'd be surprised to know, at the prodding of Bhagini Nivedita, Sister Nivedita, Abanindranath Tagore, who is a close relative of Rabindranath Tagore, he paints the first picture of Bharat Mata. The first picture of Bharat Mata was painted on the instructions and under the guidance of Sodari Nivedita, Sahodari Nivedita, or Bhagini Nivedita in Hindi. And then, the Bharat Mata had four hands. In one hand, there is Akshamala or Rudrakshaki Mala. And on one hand, there is this, Veda in the form of Talapatra Grantha, palm leaf inscriptions. And one hand, actually to bless the people. The other hand is the Varadahasta, the hand that gives the boons. The first paint of Bharat Mata in this country, the concept of Bharat Mata was brought by Nivedita, who is a direct disciple and a cultural heir of Swami Vivekananda's thought process on nationalism and Rashtriyata. And it is after seeing this Bharat Mata's painting that was done by Abanindra Thakur that a freedom fighter constructs a temple of Bharat Mata in Varanasi, which is the first temple of Bharat Mata. And this temple was inaugurated by Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi considered it a matter of pride to inaugurate this temple, and then he said there must be Bharat Mata temples everywhere in this country. He was influenced by Margaret Noble, who in turn was inspired, influenced, guided, directed, motivated by Swami Vivekananda. It was Nivedita who started this Swadeshi science movement. Very interesting. She said, independence doesn't mean simply political independence. India must be independent in all ways. She, Swami, Sodari, Sister Nivedita, she tells Jadunath Sarkar, the doyen of Indian historians, who wrote a book on Shivaji and whose research in India's, relations with East Asian countries are legion, wonderful books that he had done, original research he has done. Jadunath Sarkar, meets Sister Nivedita for inspiration, and she tells him, never lower your flag to a foreigner. See the kind of patriotism. Never lower your flag to a foreigner. Try to be the greatest authority in the particular branch of research that you have chosen for yourself. She is giving an ideal to this man. And she says, India must be recognized as the first here. Your research must help make India the best country in the world. That's what she tells Jadunath Sarkar. The Bengal School of Art, I spoke about it. One of the students of Bengal School of Art, Nandalal Basu, was the man who drew 24 images that represent Indian culture and the first copy of India's constitution. When the constitution was drafted and approved, the book was, had about 24 illustrations starting from, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Chakravarti, Ashoka, so on and so forth, down to Akbar and also the freedom movement led by Mahatma Gandhi. 24 images that represents the quintessence of India's independence movement. They were drawn by Nandalal Bosu, who is from the Bengal School of Art that was founded, inspired by Sister Nivedita. She had also inspired the scientists like Radhakant Das. He was the one who actually measured the height of Everest. We give the credit to Everest, but Radhanath Das is the one who has, done it. And then she also inspired Jagadish Chandra Bosu to do original research based on Indian ethos. You'd be surprised to know when Sister Nivedita passed away, she passed away in the residence of Jagadish Chandra Bose. She has gone there to meet Jagadish Chandra Bose and then she actually depart from this world. So, Swami, in the end, this is the contribution of Sister Nivedita. It's another matter that, she has been expelled from Ramakrishna order and then still she fights for her own, belief systems and then tries to carry forward the message of Swami Vivekananda for a resurgent Bharat Mata, India as a Jagat Guru, India as a world leader, India as a world beater. Swami Vivekananda has always said that one thing I am no, there is one famous quote of his where he says, I am no astrologer, I do not see into future, but there is one thing that I am seeing very clear, clear as crystal, clear as broad day sunlight. India will be the world leader. Indian Bharat Mata will become the Jagan Mata and the whole world will prostrate before her. This is something that I am seeing with my eyes and I am seeing into the future. This is going to happen, Swami Vivekananda said. In the end, Swami Vivekananda wrote a poem called On July 4. This poem, this July 4 is actually America's Independence Day. So Swami Vivekananda, while in America, he writes this poem. Much before he came back to India after the Chicago speech, he writes this poem called On July 4. In this poem, he explains the concept of independence. He actually uses the American independence as a pretext to tell Indians about what it means to be independent. I would like to read a couple of lines from this On July 4 to tell about Swami Vivekananda's concept of India's freedom and then rest my case. He says, behold, the dark clouds melt away that gathered thick at night and hung so like a gloomy pall over the earth, above the earth. Before thy magic touch, world awakes, birds in chorus sing, flowers raise their star-like crowns, dew set and wave thee welcome fair. The lakes are opening wide in love, their 100,000 lotus eyes to welcome thee with all their depth. This is what Swami Vivekananda wrote about freedom of America, independence of America. All hail to thee, thou Lord of light. He is not praising America directly. I welcome you to thee today. O sun, today thou sheddest liberty. Bethink thee how the world did wait and search for thee through time and clime. Some gave up home and love of friends and went in quest of thee self-banished. Through dreary oceans, through primeval forests, each step a struggle for the life or death. Then came the day when work bore fruit, and worship, love, sacrifice, fulfilled, accepted and complete. Then thou, propitious, rose to shed the light of freedom on mankind. He was not talking just about America. Till every land reflects thy light, till men and women with uplifted head behold their shackles unbroken, and know in springing joy their life renewed. This is the poem July 4 that Swami Vivekananda wrote while he was in America. This, the song, a part of the song actually, reminds us of Shubhra Jyotsna Pulakitayaminim Pulla Kusumita Drumadala Shobhinim Suhasinim Sumadhura Bhashinim Sukhadam Varadam Mataram. And part of the song reminds us of that song where the mind is without fear, where the head is held high, the Song of Freedom that Tagore wrote. Look at the kind of connection that these people had. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Swami Vivekananda's influence on independence movement and how he influenced the revolutionaries is a subject that needs to be studied in its detail. It is waiting to be studied. Swami Vivekananda, Dayananda, Aurobindo, and Veer Savarkar, these four people have given a direction to India's freedom movement, and they need to be studied, and academia must focus on the contribution of these four people. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Dhanyavad.